podcast, A Penny for Your Thoughts with me, Steve Penny. Over the coming weeks, I'm going to be talking to some great people. I hope you enjoy listening in. Thank you. Thank you very much, Darryl, for taking the time to come and talk to me today. I'm really looking forward to having our conversation. I think it will be an interesting journey. If the last time we tried this was anything to go by. So if you wouldn't mind giving us a brief introduction into who you are and what you do, and then we'll start going through the questions and see where we get to.
Yeah, good morning, Steve. Nice to talk to you. I'm an architect and health designer. I have been working in health infrastructure and health facilities in New Zealand for 28 years now. Slight shiver down the spine when I say that. But I've been an architect for 37 years. Oh, God. So
don't worry, next year it's 40 for me.
So I'm feeling quite tired. But yes. It's been an interesting kind of journey in lots of ways. And I think being an architect in public health in particular is a particular niche which I had never expected would be there. In New Zealand, the traditional wisdom is that it's too small. You have to be a generalist, and most architects have to be able to turn their hand to any kind of project, and you're the Renaissance man or whatever. But as I've found in the last 28 years, it is actually possible to do one type of project, specialise in it, and remain there and become quite deep in.
I think you've also built a strong reputation and brand, I guess, in healthcare as Darryl Carey, but also as Chow Hill in New Zealand, I think.
Yeah, I guess so. When we started out in '95, I had no familiarity with health projects. I did the super clinics in South Auckland. Was hired by Chow Hill. They had started 3 years earlier in Hamilton and recruited a small team of us here in Auckland to run the super clinic projects, and it kind of went from there. So I spent the first few years sitting in meetings with smart clinical people who knew their industry, and I knew nothing, keeping my mouth shut and thinking, I don't know half of what is being said, but I'll write it down and then go and look it up later. So it was a massive learning curve. But as I discovered that once you'd done that kind of once, then it was almost implicit that you knew a bit more and you were an expert and you could be trusted for the next one. Yep. So there was a snowball that kind of happened. It also meant that, at the time there were fewer people doing it in New Zealand. There were maybe a handful of key people I could name who actually you could say had experience in hospital design, healthcare design. Yep. There were probably more, but they were buried in a lot of the older historic firms like Worley Gilman, Stevenson Turner, and many of those quite larger, more broad-based and multidisciplinary firms across New Zealand and Australia who were delivering things at a large-scale hospital level. And I guess we were one of the two or three practices at the time that began to bring architecture and design into that area, and start to think that maybe we could do something more than the functional, institutional, governmental type of design.
Big concrete boxes, basically, a lot of the time, isn't it?
Well, big Ministry of Works type things, crudely. But it never was quite like that. But yes. So, and from there, I've been quite equal parts threatened and delighted to see the growth of skill, experience, focus, and just numbers of people doing health design work across the country. It's been quite lovely, actually.
Yeah, I think it's a good thing to have a diverse group of people in any sector, really, because you do get different ideas, and I think you run the risk of becoming one-dimensional in a particular market. If there's only a very small group of people that kind of do those jobs all the time, you run the risk of being a little bit one-dimensional. But I'm not saying that that's the case, but it certainly can be a risk.
Yeah, there's a wee bit of that. We are about 12 years ago, I was part of a small team that formed the Health Design Council here in New Zealand, and that was kind of a deliberate attempt to start cross-pollinating ideas and networking and sharing knowledge and information, because crudely we were all working for the same clients, actually the same 20 DHBs, and in fact solving the same problems in the same way and being paid for it multiple times. So it seemed a bit daft when we could actually share information, save the taxpayer some time and money perhaps, but also buy us some time to do better and improve for the next one. So we've got this organisation which has now been going for continuously, and it's very strong now, is an interesting mix of people who want to be collegial and collaborative and who also compete with each other. And,
I remember those early years, actually.
You do, yes. You were on our committee, I think, quite early on.
Yeah, I was. And I stupidly took on the role of treasurer at one point.
Now I've got it, so thanks for that. I'm trying to give it away at the minute.
Yes, quite a challenging role, that one. I didn't think it would be, but it was actually quite challenging. But,
try now, and there's over 500 members, and we've started running conferences again, and it's all got a bit complex. But
indeed, yes.
I can't say I'm unhappy with it.
No. I mean, I think it's a great organisation. It was great to be there, fairly close to the start of it, and see people actually wanting to share information. Because you do get the impression sometimes that everyone is very precious about what they know. But in that sort of environment, it was good to see people open and honestly sharing, what they did well and what they did badly, which I think is more important.
Yeah, it took a while to get there. The first few years were a lot of people sitting with their arms folded and being very reluctant to share information. But I think I did push that quite hard, because I think there's a maturity that goes with professionalism, that if you recognise you're not going to win everything, you can't do everything, that most of the key work that I've done in health has been in collaboration with others, and those others are very often my competitors, and having the maturity to go, okay, we don't know everything. We can help each other out, and we can actually produce something that's better. And then, next time we compete again. Big deal.
Yeah. No, I think it is a very mature way to look at the marketplace, I think, and sometimes it takes somebody to lead that, because it doesn't happen naturally most of the time.
I think it is now. I think there's a culture now around Health Design Council, and even Te Whatuaro Ministry have now recognised that it's not a body that's there to advocate for commercial interests, that it's actually got some principles and some aspirations around just doing better and improving the quality of what we do in New Zealand, just exactly the same as Te Whatuaro, actually.
I'll just briefly sort of change track a little bit and just talk a little bit about your home life, if you wouldn't mind.
Yes, I do have one.
Well, sometimes I wonder.
Sometimes I wonder too. I have a wonderful wife, married to a lawyer since for 43 years now.
Congratulations.
Thank you. We met at university in the hostel. I came from Nelson, the South Island. She came from Rotorua, and I often think about those little choices you make about, where you go and what you do and what that leads to. We might never have met if we hadn't made a couple of choices. We married in 1980, and I had my 21st a month after the wedding. If my kids said that to me now, I'd be going, "Are you nuts?"
Yes.
But I don't know, the confidence of youth, I suppose. I was kind of certain, and I kind of knew, and we've been very fortunate to grow together and develop together. We have 3 boys, all of whom are over 30 now. One's married and have a grandson who's coming up to 11. So,
oh my God,
that's all very nice.
That doesn't make you feel old at all, does it?
Not at all. No. Having a 40-year-old son is enough to make you feel old, I can tell you.
Yeah, my dad keeps telling me that he doesn't want to know how old I am, because he's 80 next year, and me being 55, it's kind of, I don't want to know that. That's too much. I can't believe that I've got a son who's 55. But there you go. It happens to all of us, fortunately.
I said the same thing to my mother a few weeks ago, because I just turned 64 a few weeks ago. And
happy birthday!
Thank you. How does it feel to have a 64-year-old child? And she was not happy with that question, to be sure.
No, I can understand that. I think I can understand that. So let's just go back to the beginning again. So you're an architect now. Were you always going to be an architect?
That's a really interesting question. I have 3 sisters, and I grew up in Nelson. Dad was the groundsman at Trafalgar Park, so we lived next door, and so surrounded by cricket and rugby and all of that. And I obviously was doing reasonably well at school. I discovered tech drawing and thought, tech drawing, this is good. I can do this. I can understand this, and was quite good at it, and thought, great, I'll be a draftsman. There were some local friends who I worked with in the holidays who had a house painting business, a Dutchman called Herman Lenting. And we got chatting about this, and I was telling him what I was doing. I must have been sixth form or seventh form or something. And he said, well, why do you want to be a draftsman? Why, you're smart. Why don't you be an architect? And I was like, what's that? I had no idea what it was, because no one in my family's ever been to university. I'm still the first in our family to go to university. So it was quite a break. So he showed me some plans that he'd had and described it a little bit. And I made some inquiries and looked at it and thought, yeah, you know what, I could probably do that. The thing that sold it for me was the only architecture school in the country at the time was in Auckland. Oh, I got to leave the small town Nelson and go to the other end of the country.
Yeah.
And so I hit Auckland when I was 17.
Wow, okay.
Because I'd been shifted forward a couple of years in primary school and was always the youngest in my class, which was fine, I suppose. But I did quite a lot of growing up in my sort of teens was actually at university in Auckland alongside Margaret. So, it was a really interesting, exciting time where, I took too long to get my degree. Started in 77 and didn't actually finish until 85, which was shameful for an architectural degree.
We can delve a bit into that, because I do remember that being quite an interesting little journey, I think.
Yes. I got involved in student politics is the short answer. Got distracted by a few things. And in the middle of that, the Springbok tour happened, and I was doing some work on the student newspaper. And, it was a time to follow passions, I suppose. Margaret very sensibly finished her degree in the usual standard time and then went out to work. And I still had a few years to go. And then we had Nicholas, our eldest. So I stopped and was a full-time parent for 12 months. It also happened to be the time when I hadn't passed enough at university, so I was excluded from university.
Wow.
And had to apply to get back in on a form called Form X, believe it or not. Went back after that 12-month period. Living in Papakura seemed like the end of the earth. It was the end of the motorway. And realising actually I did need to finish this degree. Shouldn't be mucking around. I almost gave it away, to be fair, but I also knew that I had to bring some discipline to it. So went back part-time and juggled childcare and study my last 2 years to complete the degree, and went from there. But that taught me a lot about time management, discipline. Those three hours when Nick was in Croatia, I did not get back. So if I didn't use them, I would lose them. And so that was quite interesting. I would imagine
at that time as well, having childcare facilities at university was quite uncommon.
No, there was a pretty good university creche, actually, and some friends came from that. So that was really good, and it was just along the road from architecture school, so it was quite convenient.
That's good.
But the year at home in Papakura was weird. We were in a little cul-de-sac with, 8 houses or something, and no one spoke to us because I was the weirdo guy who stayed at home and looked after the child, and Margaret was the weirdo woman who picked up a briefcase and went to work every day. So it was a bit of a lonely and isolating time, and I think part of that was just learning that actually there was more that I could be doing, and I needed to refocus, I guess. So a lot of life lessons in that time, I guess.
I don't think it's a bad thing to actually take that time to think sometimes. Now, certainly right at the start of your career, if you're going to commit yourself to something for a long time, you want to make sure it's the right thing, don't you?
Yeah, although I do find that an interesting question, Steve, because I think that's a very old school thing. You decide what profession you're going to be in, and you're in it for the rest of your life. That doesn't happen with a lot of people now.
No, it doesn't. You're right, actually.
And many of the most interesting pathways, I think, are those kind of gaps or crossovers or blends of things now. I kind of look back and think I could have done quite a lot of things differently. Maybe I'm just stubborn or patient or something, but I've stuck at it, and I keep finding new challenges and new ways to re-energise, although I guess it does get a little bit harder the longer you do it.
It does, really, yes. I must admit, I'm thinking myself, I've been working since I was 16, so next year I'm 56. I've been working for 40 years. It's starting to get to a point where I feel like I've done enough, to be honest. But that putting that to one side, I think, myself, I fell into the role that I'm doing. My dad decided I needed a job when I was 16. He got me working for the company he was working for as a contractor, and I went in on the design, so a design and build company. And I've really never looked back. When I've got bored with stuff, I've usually changed countries. It seems to be the way I add excitement into my life.
That's interesting. I've never done that actually. I flirted with the idea. We like cities. We love cities. Every time we go on holidays, we go to cities. And New York's got a buzz about it, for example. And for a while, I entertained the pipe dream of going and working in New York, sitting in a corner office somewhere in Manhattan, and creating wonderful stuff. It's fair to say I left my run a bit late.
I don't think it's ever too late to try something, but it does get to a point where the level of energy required may not be where you want to spend your energy.
Yeah, you're right. Actually, I'm now at the age where I'm sort of. This will sound horrible, but I think a lot of people do it. You start to calculate things like how many bottles of wine do you drink in a year, how many books do you read in a year, how many years do I have left? Therefore, there's a finite number of these things, and then you start doing the quantity-quality equation, right? Why drink bad wine? Why read a bad book if it's not? If you're not hitting your buttons, then forget it and move on to another one.
I think that's true of everything in life. Why spend time on people that don't add something to your life is the other side of it as well. Because I think
maybe.
There's people around you sometimes that are negative in the way they are, and we haven't got a big circle of friends, but the friends we have got are really good quality friends, like good quality wine. You get something out of the relationship. There's energy exchanged in some way, and you feel better for spending time with them. And I think it's the same as if you're doing something that makes you feel tired or weak or drains you in some way, then the right thing to do is stop doing that thing, whatever it may be, because you have got a limited resource. We're all limited in some way, and it's best to do stuff that actually fills your cup rather than empties it.
I think that's right. It's hard to change gear, I think, over time. You're like me. You're a small company. You do everything. You say yes to everything. You get out there and do stuff, and that helps you build things up, build your reputation, build your experience. And it's very hard to say no to people and clients and projects that maybe in other circumstances you might not want to do, particularly when times are a bit lean. But it's been bouncing around my head a little bit about everyone keeps asking me about retirement because you get to that age and what are you doing next? What are you doing next? And I can't imagine retiring in the sense of just stopping, putting slippers on, sitting at home, getting in the way of everybody. For me, I've been trying to clarify what it means, and I think it's actually about choice. Choosing or being able to choose who you work with, how you work, what you work on, and where you work and when you work. If you can have a bit more control over some of that, and that aligns with what you enjoy and what you want to do, then happy days. I can carry on until I can't hold a pen anymore. That does mean that you get a bit more choosy about the things that you think, actually, I'm not really doing this. I don't do this anymore.
I think that's true. Certainly from my point of view, I'm at the moment thinking that, and Christian, my wife and I, we have got this quite strong plan that when we retire, we want to up sticks and move back to Europe. And
really?
And actually probably buy somewhere in Italy and live in Italy and travel around Europe, because we haven't seen much of Europe, even though we lived over there for a long time. We didn't do a lot of traveling around Europe at the time. So we want to spend time doing that. We're like yourselves. We love cities, and there's lots of cities to see in Europe. There's not so many on this side of the world. So the idea of traveling from here, it just takes too long and costs too much. And, we have this great plan, whether it will come to fruition or not, you have to wait and see, but plan, buy a property in Tuscany, a little 2-bedroom place in Tuscany, use that as a base and then travel around from there. And, the thing that I'm really looking forward to is that we can travel somewhere, and if we decide we like it, want to stay a bit longer, we'll just stay a bit longer. We won't have that you've only got 4 weeks annual leave a year thing in our way. Right. And I think that will give us the chance to actually really enjoy where we go and get as much out of it as we can. And I'm keen to do some other stuff. I want to start doing some proper photography. I take loads of snaps, but I want to actually do some proper photography. And Chrissy likes doing watercolour painting. So the idea is we go somewhere, I'll take some photos, she'll do some painting, we'll walk around, we'll see all the stuff, we'll, just relax and enjoy ourselves. Now, the cost of living in Europe is a fraction of what it is over here. here. Travel's really cheap. Yeah, it is a lot less. Property prices are pretty low compared to here, and food and other things are a lot cheaper. I mean, it's a bigger market, so there's much more choice. And if we can reach that goal, we'll end up enjoying our retirement a great deal, because we both want to do that. We both want to spend time travelling and enjoying the world.
Yeah, it's interesting. We flirted with that idea a little bit, but I can't see us settling outside New Zealand. I think this is home. We have family here, and having a grandchild, I think, does change your perspective on all of that. Yeah. But we enjoy travel, but it's a buzz. But it's interesting when we did 7 or 8 weeks in Europe, 2019. So 4 years ago now. The sense of, and it was great, it was fantastic, but the sense of kind of relief isn't quite the right word, but when we landed back here in New Zealand, it was just kind of like you could kind of just relax a bit. You weren't on tour, you weren't having to think about connections and deal with the unfamiliar and the novelty of everything.
Yeah, well, that's probably that is probably the fact that you had a deadline on the travel as well, so you had to do all of these things in this certain order at this certain time in order to get from where you were to where you wanted to be in that period of time, maybe?
Only a bit. We hate the whole idea of rushing around, ticking the boxes and seeing the sights. So we deliberately planned it so that we had, there was a travel day and then there was a week or 2 weeks or whatever, just stopping and being, I went to a conference in Paris once and we extended it for a couple of weeks just in Paris in an Airbnb in Montmartre. Just sitting there living like the locals, getting used to going down to the boulangerie and getting a baguette and coffee.
I love that city. Absolutely love Paris.
Jumping on the metro and all of that. And it wasn't, we didn't even go up the Eiffel Tower the whole time because it was like, it couldn't be asked of the queue. We've seen it, we can see it, we'd rather experience stuff. And it was the things that we hadn't planned that were the most delightful and the most memorable.
I think Chrissy and I had a long weekend in Paris when the kids were quite small. Friends took the kids for us and we went and spent 4 days in Paris. And the most enjoyable meal that we had was in a little restaurant down a side road that was full of French-speaking people. And we went there after we found it, we went there. Every next meal that we had, we went there because the food was fantastic, the atmosphere was fantastic, and I found that my sort of pidgin French was enough for them to actually be nice to us, rather than shouting at them in English and trying to get them to understand in English. I tried to speak in French, and they appreciated the effort, not the quality, but the effort.
Yeah, no, that's right. Well, I can get away with it a little bit more because I'm not. Didn't have the hated English accents.
Exactly. Yes. There is a bit of that, fortunately. So just talking about professional life, what would you say was your biggest challenge so far?
Professional life, biggest challenge. Probably 2 aspects to it. One would be, the business and keeping the business going. Because I was like the second wave of owners at Chowhill. Richard and Chen started it, and from Hamilton, and built it up from very modest beginnings. Morris and I joined in Auckland, so we were the second wave of kind of owners, and then they sold out. Now I'm almost sold out. Morris sold out last year. And so there's a third wave and now a fourth wave of owners. So getting that continuity and that sense of a shared set of values amongst us that's been pretty consistent, and a shared approach across time across that length of time has been quite something. A firm's been going for 30 years. We're not huge. There's only 70 odd of us, and we've had ups and downs. But that, when I look back, I think, well, actually, now that I'm almost at the point of stepping away from involvement in ownership and governance of the business, that's quite heartening to see. The development of people, skills, experience, and all that. So that's I suppose one. The other would be, but that's been difficult. With the way the industry goes up and down and challenges, and just even the last couple of years, the last 12 months have been quite a challenge. With people holding their breath and not making decisions, and particularly in health, which is probably only 25-30% of our revenue. It used to be a lot more. So we're trying to maintain diverse streams and diverse locations because we find that helps. But there's been a little bit lately where, lots of sectors are down, lots of regions are down, and sometimes they balance each other, but there hasn't been a lot of that. So it has been tricky to keep it going in the last little while. But, I've developed enough confidence to know that we'll recover and keep going. But I probably won't miss the angst about that.
I'm fully with you on that one. Being a small business, 5 people, and over the last couple of years with the impact of COVID on every aspect of life, I think it's been particularly challenging. I know there's other industries like hospitality that have been hit a lot harder than the construction industry has, but that's not to say there's still been businesses going under in the construction industry over the last 2 years, whether that's builders or consultants or others. You see people downsizing quite a lot. It is that I think the thing that stresses me most is somebody said to me, what you've got to remember is when you employ staff, you're not just paying one mortgage, you're paying all of the mortgages. And that kind of hit me really hard because it's like, actually, you're right. If this isn't successful, then I'm putting all of those guys' livelihoods at risk.
Yeah, except that can be paralysing. I found that hard to think like that. I like to think of it more of as a kind of a partnership between the firm and each person involved. They're making a choice to be with us or not.
Yes,
we're making a choice to employ them or not someone else, and you need to get something mutually beneficial out of that.
Absolutely, yeah.
I've always been of the view that work is a small part of your life. We all have lives outside work.
Yeah, we do.
And it's been a lot more prevalent in recent times. We've had to adopt through COVID and everything else a lot more flexible work policy than we've had before, and almost every person in our organisation now has some degree of flexibility, whether it's starting half an hour later or working 4 days a week or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
And they know that we're not going to be unreasonable about stuff because we've all been there. Some of us have had to juggle childcare and work, and everyone has a different phase of their life. When your kids are small, you want to be home in the evening for mealtime, bedtime, and then you work a bit later. When your kids are a bit bigger, maybe you stay an extra hour or two longer in the office and then you go home. And it's just different. It's understanding that if you have, particularly in professional services, if you have people who are committed and dedicated and they're actually not stressed about stuff that's non-work related, you'll get more out of them.
You get better outcomes,
Yeah. And the clients are happier and they're happier and that's good. But it does mean you got to think and plan. We often come in here now and think, where is everybody? And some of them are working from home, some of them are on site. And I'm hearing a lot of stories now about people companies who are relocating or designing new offices, and they are allowing for 50% of their staff being in-house at any given time.
Yeah. I've seen some interesting studies around that sort of that work-life balance, on social media feeds generally, but they're talking about businesses saying, right, we're not going to have annual leave. What we're going to say is if you want to take leave, be off as long as you want to be. And they've taken that step, and what they've seen is productivity has gone up because people aren't pressured to have a 4-week holiday and it has to be approved and all the rest of it. They do make sure, you do have to talk to your line manager and you do have to agree when you're going to be away. But what they're finding is because that's no longer a limitation, people don't take the mickey. They don't take months off, and they're willing to work that a little bit harder because they know they can take time off when they need to, and it's not a constrained number of days. And I don't think I could be brave enough to do that in a small business like mine. But, I think it's to your point that if you take away that levels of stress that sometimes work involves, you get better outcomes from your people for sure. And if you can manage their stress levels in some way by, being that flexible that they can take time when they need it, it makes a huge difference to people's lives for sure.
Yeah, I think you got to plan it, and it does require a different approach and attitude from the company. There are quite a few people in our organisation at the senior levels who struggle with this.
Yeah.
And, I can't see people I don't know who's coming and going. So visibility and understanding and scheduling is quite important around that. And we're very collaborative in the way we work in teams. So often you want to just, I I've got an idea. I need to sort that out or check it out or evaluate it. Let's talk. Oh, they're not here today. Oh, okay. So you've got to think a little bit different around that. But I think there's still a lingering old school attitude that, I used to work every hour that God sends, and young people today don't know how lucky they are, and
Yes.
just toughen up and get on with it because I had to do it. And I've never subscribed to that. Before Chow Hill, I worked in a firm where we did that sort of stuff. We did the whole architecture school thing. We work all night. 5 people working on drawings all night. I go home, have a shower, put a suit on, come back, grab the prints and go off and deliver them to the client, and everyone collapses. I mean, that's really unhealthy. And
yes, it is, yeah. I think we've all done that. I mean, at some point in your career, you work somewhere where the only thing that the bosses care about is the work. They don't give a monkeys about you. I had a boss once who would go out drinking on a Friday lunchtime with a client and come in 3 hours later drunk and say, right, you've got a job to do this weekend. You're working the weekend. And it was, if you don't do that, you're out the door. And it's that's not acceptable. It's just not acceptable to do that. But that's the different time. Fortunately, now that wouldn't happen as much now, I don't think.
No, look, it may be in some jobs, but it certainly isn't when you're trying to get the best out of creative people.
No, certainly not. No. So let's just move on. What would you say would be your proudest achievement, personal or professional, or both actually, personal, professional?
That's a good question. Well, personal, I guess, I'm proud of my family, proud of the fact that I'm still married after 43 years, and we still like each other and all of that.
Yeah.
And that we've had our challenges and our ups and downs, but we're still surviving. So I guess that's pretty cool. We started late professionally, and things were pretty lean when we were a lot younger. But this firm has been pretty successful, and so I've been able to become much more secure. I'm privileged and I'm not uber wealthy or anything, but I now no longer have this kind of fear about, oh my God, I'm going to be reusing tea bags on National Super and wrapping up in blankets instead of turning the heater on. So we're comfortable, and that's kind of cool. And we've got choices. So personally, that's kind of cool. Professionally, obviously, it's the continuity of the firm. So they're both the same answer, really. One is a work family and one's a home family.
I think having longevity in a business is something that is something to be very proud of, because it shows that the brand means something.
I think that's right. I think we do client surveys, what makes us different, what makes Chow Hill different from other firms, and it's interesting the messages we get back. It's very often about that we are not precious, that we're collaborative, that we listen, and that we work with clients. I think there's quite a lot of architects who, and everyone knows the stereotype, the arrogant creative architect, trust me, and you can only do it my way, and this is how it should be done. And we've never been like that.
I think there's the same issue, I think, with a lot of engineering businesses, that they don't actually ask the questions because they already believe they know all of the answers. And I think, if you don't understand what the client's drivers are, you're only going to produce something that's not right.
I don't know how you can live your life thinking you know all the answers. I mean, that must be so boring.
Yeah, it must be. I mean, my view is that I'm younger than you, but I'm still sort of in my 50s. I'm still learning something every day.
Yeah.
The reason for starting doing this podcast is because I wanted to learn something different and try something that I'd never tried before. And if you're not curious, then you're very limited.
Absolutely right. I think, and I see that in the political discourse around the country at the minute. All these people who are absolutely certain about things. And definite and extreme in some cases about things, and I think isn't a sign of kind of intelligence that maybe you're a bit questioning and a bit doubtful about things.
Yeah.
Like the more I find out, the more I realise I don't know. Rather.
Yeah. I think. I mean, I don't know if you've ever watched the program Ted Lasso, but there's a quote from Ted Lasso that kind of feeds exactly to that point, and it's be curious, not judgmental. And I think we could all do better by being more curious and less judgmental. Yeah. Because we do.
I love that every day coming to work and being curious and finding out what's driving things. And there's been plenty of projects and teams that I've dealt with where people are acting in a weird way and causing tension and stress, and they're aggressive, and I see people reacting all around. And my immediate thought now is to go, well, what's behind that? What's driving that? What is that person's measure of success? Why are they feeling that way? And as soon as you kind of can understand that, it starts to unlock how you respond, because you can't actually change someone else. I've learned over the years, you can only change how you respond to them.
Absolutely, yeah. That's that. I mean, I think that's something that is quite difficult to do when you're younger. Is you tend to be quite reactive, and as you get older, I'd say for myself, I've found that over the last 5 years in particular, I've become more and more socialist every year. I just feel more and more that like in as much as, I want to be part of the community that I live in. I want to help the community that I live in. I want to try and give back as much as I can, where I can and when I can. And that's something that has changed in me, and I don't really know what it is, other than I guess just being aware of what's going on in the world and realizing that there's too much hate, too much fundamentalism in every extreme there is, and we need to try and pull that back in a little bit.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I think COVID also taught us quite a lot about that. The switch in my head around COVID was that in order to be effective in facing that challenge as a world, we actually needed a response. You can talk about individual rights to not wear a mask or not be vaccinated or whatever, but actually the analogy of things like, well, if I choose to smoke or not, or if I choose to not wear my seatbelt or not, they're not right, because none of those things are actually endangering, at least so, those around you. And a collective response is the only way through. And I think that's one of the things that kind of resonated a lot with me, really.
Yeah. I mean, I think you can disagree with the vaccine mandates and the sort of forced lockdowns as much as you like, but if you look at the reality of the situation, the healthcare system in New Zealand in particular would have been overwhelmed if we didn't do what we did, and a lot more people would have died. And I think it's easy to forget, actually. And I mean, you look at where we're going with healthcare at the moment. In Christchurch, we had a 24-hour emergency doctors available to us up until a week ago. That service has now been removed and will not be reinstated. And what that means at the moment is that between Ashburton and Kaikoura, the only place you can go after 10 o'clock in the evening to seek medical advice is Christchurch Hospital.
An excellent hospital, though it is.
It's an excellent hospital, but the reason I bring that up is that sort of thing. That's I think a direct consequence of the stress that the pandemic caused on the health sector, and that so many people have left it that they cannot keep the staffing levels where they need to be to provide the services they need to provide.
And it's a global thing, actually, the workforce challenges. But it's more than COVID, actually. I did a presentation at the Health Design Council conference last week, or the week before last. And one of the things I mentioned was that I'd been recently in 3 emergency departments in regional hospitals, and every single one of them was slammed, half the size that they should be, patients stacked in corridors on beds. In one case, I saw a man on a bed in front of a medication fridge. He couldn't actually get in and out of the medication fridge because he was on the bed. No privacy, no dignity, noise like you wouldn't believe. Staff with, at the end of their tether, eyes out on stalks. And I looked at this. I mean, I couldn't even take photographs of the interiors because I couldn't avoid taking a photograph of a patient. One guy was in a bed in a hospital, in an ED corridor for 92 hours.
Jesus.
And I'm like, this isn't COVID. This is just simply under-resourcing, under-planning. Each one of them, there's one at the minute I'm doing a plan, they need 1,000 square metres right now. They're getting in the hospital probably in 10 years. They will be lucky to last 10 months before something happens. Either someone will leave, someone will die, or something. It's just, and I think this is insane. Why have we let it get to this point?
It's chronic underfunding for decades, isn't it? That's the issue.
Yes, I would say. Trying to catch up, but you can't catch up when the workforce isn't there. Everywhere I go at the moment, yes, I can plan a new building. Yes, we can throw money at it and build a new facility. Even in Christchurch, the new ED we did down there a few years ago, a quarter of it was not opened for, and I'm not even sure it still is opened because they can't staff it. Now, it was the right thing to size it for the future, but you can't operate it.
Yeah, I mean, I think the bigger and the wider issue there is that we as a society, for some reason, will accept that people who do vocational jobs, and nursing and being a doctor is definitely a vocational job. You have got to love doing it to be a doctor or a nurse. We don't want to pay them because you're doing something you love, so you don't need money. Well, no, sorry, they're part of a society that is totally dominated by money, unfortunately. And if you don't pay them the going wage, that a wage that allows them to have a life outside of work and treat them with the respect they deserve, you're not going to get the staff. It's like, I mean, if you treated your staff the way nurses are treated, how many staff would you have?
Quite a few less, and there'd be a very different quality of people. Different people
Exactly.
more looking for themselves and their issues for understandable reasons. Look, I don't want to.
It's an issue.
Belittle the health staff because they're magnificent people.
They are, absolutely.
And they're dedicated to what they do. But yeah, boy, it's tough out there.
Yeah.
And I can't quite reconcile that with, we need tax cuts and, we're not sure we should be throwing more money at big buildings and maybe the private system does it better. And I think, here we go. Slippery slope. And you would have seen it in the UK, no doubt.
Yeah. I think this is a global issue, certainly the western half of the world anyway, for sure. It's an industry that is recognised as being a fundamental human right in most countries, apart from the US, but yet we still massively underfund it and don't really treat it with the respect it deserves. And it's affecting our societies in a very negative way at the moment, I think. Which is
memories. Humans are terrible, aren't we? If we don't see a threat in front of us, we have this massive ability to be able to forget it, put it in the back pocket. You can't see the COVID-19 molecule, virus. You can't see climate change, although I think many of us are beginning to see it.
Oh, look at Europe this summer.
Yeah, but it's somewhere else. It's happening to someone else, and it's not today. So we have a capacity to kind of just go on with willful denial in many ways. Yeah. And then if you bring it up, you're being an elite intellectual and you can't be trusted. Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe you just let's change the topic slightly, I think.
Yeah, thank you.
We could talk about that one for ages, but I'm sure it's a good idea. So let's look just a little bit more in depth on something that maybe you recall that changed your perspective on things in quite a fundamental way. And what was that thing, and what did it change for you?
What I guess the most fundamental event that changed my life was we lost a daughter, 3 days old. So that was hard. It must have been about 38 years ago now, something like that. And but still feels kind of raw. She had a cardiac condition called Epstein's, which was a heart valve condition. And wasn't evident until after birth because the heart operates differently in utero than it does after. So a lovely birth in birthing unit in Papakura, local GP. It was all very nice. But the next morning she was struggling to breathe and looking slightly blue. And suddenly we're in ambulances and running around hospitals and trying to find out what's going on. Ended up in Green Lane and she was on an incubator and then be told that the only treatment for this was surgery to replace the heart valve on a newborn's heart, and that would have to be redone on a regular basis as the heart grew, and that really wasn't viable. I believe this is different now, but at the time we were effectively told there's nothing that you can do. And when everything you read is about miracle cures and medical advances and all of that, so you kind of you expect that something wonderful is going to happen, and it just didn't happen, and that was quite hard. So that really threw us for a loop, both of us.
I can imagine.
We couldn't turn to each other because we were both suffering from the same pain. Yeah. And it literally stopped our life in our tracks in many ways. Margaret couldn't focus on her newly established law practice. I couldn't settle. we ended up, she was very smart. She ended up realising we needed counselling or we were going to fly apart. And she found the right counsellor, and I managed to get over myself and open up and understand and share and all that. And it saved us, really. People say that adversity pushes you together and makes you stronger.
It doesn't.
It's actually crap. Just as many times, probably more so, it pushes you apart. So that changed our lives, really, in terms of our perspective on things. I think for Margaret it changed. She was less enamoured of the legal treatment. She's a lawyer, and working our way through the profession in that way. I became more focused on a balance in between work and life and all those things. And yet it still ripples through, I guess. It's such a deep, fundamental thing in your life that I find it hard to tell you exactly how it changed me in my perspective, but it certainly did. Yeah.
Unfortunately, Chrissy and I had a not quite the same, but a similar experience when we first got married. Our first child had a cystic hygroma in utero and died at, I think it was 28 weeks, and that was at a point where Chrissy had to actually have induced labour to deliver the unfortunately dead baby, and that, similar to yourselves, it drove a wedge between us because we didn't know how to deal with it. We didn't know how to cope with that loss. And in honesty, it's not until I started going to counselling for my depression about 4 years ago that somebody explained to me what happened. And it's what the therapist said to me, what happened when that baby died is you're not mourning the loss of the baby, you're mourning the loss of the potential, that the life, because I don't know if when you're a parent, you imagine what your kids are going to be like when they grow up, and you imagine them being fantastic people and doing wonderful things. And when that child gets taken away from you at a very early age, all of that potential that you were imagining has gone, and it becomes something that you don't know how to deal with because you've not seen them grow up, you've not seen them have life experiences and all the rest of it. And it's something that 22nd of November 1997 is the birthday of my first child, but I've never seen him and I'll never forget him. And you're right, it's still, I've got goosebumps running up and down my back talking about it right now. It's something that never goes away. It gets easier in some ways, but that day every year, me and Chrissy, we just have a bit of a quiet moment at some point and just remember because we miss him weirdly, even though we never met him.
We're the same. November as well, Steve.
Really? Oh, God.
Yeah. And I look around also, and occasionally she was quite distinctive. She had a big shock of dark hair. Yeah. And quite, deep, what looked like purpley blue eyes, but her hair stood out. And you look around now and you see people who you think, similar age, similar hair. Oh gosh, maybe that's what Ellen could have looked like or could have been. And you just can't. And now I'm surrounded by people who are that age, and But I tell you, even this discussion, one thing I discovered in that whole process is that it's actually, this kind of thing is actually much, much more common than people think. Yeah. And that and you talk to the medical professionals and they'll tell you that as well. But people don't talk about it. So it used to. I'm a little bit heart on my sleeve type guy, so I will talk about stuff that's happening and going on. And I think people sometimes found that quite difficult. A number of conversations were just stopped because how you feeling? Oh, I'm actually a bit shit because my daughter died. And people are like, oh my God, I can't. How do I respond to that? But occasionally you get someone who goes, well, it's interesting you say that. Actually, this happened to us. Yeah,
and I think I think men in particular find it difficult to talk about this kind of thing, and it's because we're supposed to be rock solid and no emotions and all the rest of it. That is why most people that commit suicide are men, because they don't talk about stuff.
It's true.
We don't know how to deal with emotions because we're brought, certainly our generation are brought up believing that you have to be a stiff upper lip and you don't cry in public and all the rest of it. Well, like you said about adversity making you stronger. That attitude makes you a lot weaker. The strength is in being able to express how you feel without feeling self-conscious about it, without worrying what people are going to say. And when I did my post on LinkedIn about my depression, Chrissy, my kids, other people I talked to about it said, that's a really bad idea. What if people won't give you work because they think, you're not going to be able to do it? But this is more important than that. It's more important that we talk about it.
I agree with you. And I think that there's a stigma associated with mental health as well. I have a friend who's involved in insurance, and I'm fairly sure he's been stressed and depressed for a wee while. But he knows that if he seeks counselling or help or has a referral for something, that there are actual implications for insurance, for finance, for that kind of stuff. And you think, hang on a minute, this isn't right. If I hit my leg and I go to hospital and get treated from it, everyone's like, oh, you hurt your leg, that's fine, I hope you recover well, and how can we support you? If I have an illness that's a mental illness and I need an intervention, or I'm depressed or I need some help or whatever, and I seek it and I get it and find ways to move past it or through it, that's fine.
You're penalised.
Somehow there's the stigma associated with it. You can't then be trusted.
Well, I had to declare it when I got my life insurance, and it did push my premium up.
Yeah, there you go. It's had a physical, financial consequence to you.
But I knew that. But I guess the reality is, though, if I didn't get the treatment for it, the physical consequence would be a lot worse. That's it's that balance. Is I know there's going to be an implication, but actually, it's more important that I do something about it, and it's more important that I share it so that other people will be brave enough to do something about it. That's kind of that's where I got to, and I don't regret doing it. It's probably one of the most widely looked at posts I've ever done.
Yeah, and it's a brave thing to do.
Well, I had a number of people phone me up and take me out for a coffee and talk to me about it because they were worried about me, and it was it was 100% positive response. There was no negative response at all, and that sort of justified the risk. And I didn't see it as a risk, if I'm honest. Other people did, but I didn't, because it's just something I felt that needed to be done.
Yeah, well, I think if you're in a context where it is a risk, like I could imagine, say you're a hotshot lawyer or something in a big downtown firm, and you kind of proclaim something like that, then that probably is a risk professionally. But I think there's something wrong with that environment, profession, if seeking help for something that you need becomes a professional risk.
Well, I mean, at the time, the business was 4 months old.
Wow.
So, that was part of the issue, is that I was really struggling with a whole load of things, and I recognised that I needed to do something. And, professionally, it could have been a risk, but I'm glad I did it, and I'm quite happy to talk about it whenever anybody asks me. And it's an important thing to be open about, I would say. And let's move on to something a little bit more, hopefully a little bit more positive.
We keep doing this, don't we?
We do. We go. Yeah, we try not to do it, but we do. Yes. Yeah. So, what do you do when you want to recharge your batteries? What is it that you do to relax and enjoy yourself?
A little bit hedonistic, I suppose. I make sure I have good coffee, good wine, good beer, good whiskey, food. I sometimes cook. I like to cook and pull a cookbook off the shelf and challenge myself for something new. And I really enjoy that. I think I've worked out that I think it's the same creative urge brings me to work, but it's actually much more immediate. I don't have to wait 10 years for a builder to finish it. I can actually,
enjoy it immediately.
Half an hour, yeah. So there is that. A lot of music, a lot of books, a lot of TV. Just I've kind of developed a way of a rhythm at the minute of not quite switching off, but compartmentalizing stuff. So I might have really tough stuff going on during the work week. I have an ability to be able to put that in a section of the brain, know that it's there, but not actually agonize about it. And when I tell people about this, some people are like, I don't understand how you can do that, and I can't explain it either. But I think I've learned over time that there's an unconscious activity that happens when I do that. Sleep on it, for example. Just put something in the back of your head and trust your brain's going to work on it. And I found that I'm at my most effective and most alert and responsive in the mornings. So I'll often wake up in the morning and find that the answer's there, and that's just having the confidence that it will be there. There've been times when I've still don't know what I'm going to say half an hour before I'm meant to present something or discuss something with a client, and that used to scare the bejesus out of me. I'd have to be prepared and that. But I've now learned that I actually can talk my way and think my way through it with some confidence in front of people, and it often is better. But the flip side of that, having said that, is there are times when stuff just overwhelms and I can't put it in the box for some reason, and I lie awake for 2 hours at night processing it and trying to understand it, and that doesn't help either.
No, that tends to drive you away from an answer rather than towards one, I find. So in terms of your influences in your life, who would you say was your biggest influence?
It's a really interesting question. I'm not sure there is one. I think I'm a bit of a magpie in that sense, in that I worked with a lot of people, and because it took me so damn long to get my degree, I know a lot of people in our business as well. So I think I glean little bits and pieces, little shiny bits that attract me from everyone around me. And sometimes the people that are the hardest and most challenging to work with are the ones you can kind of glean stuff on. I've learned a lot about what not to do from certain people as well.
Yes, I think we've got a list of those people. Yeah,
I'm not sure I have a huge mentor in that sense. I'm not sure I could point to a single individual. It's more a collection of people. It's interesting. I've often thought about where my personality comes from and who I am, because I'm in the unusual situation of having two fathers.
Right.
I have a birth father who I didn't meet until I was in my 30s. Obviously, my adopted father, who I knew growing up. So actually, they both died in the last 12, 14 months.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that, Darryl.
Well, yeah, very careless of me to lose two fathers at a time. But they're very, very different people. And, my adopted father's a much more easygoing kind of guy now. He's had his issues and he was a sportsman and all that. But he's the guy a lot of my habits and attitudes were formed by. But there were things that weren't. And meeting Robin, my birth father, so late in life, was an interesting experience, because it kind of this letter out of the blue. There's a whole story behind it. But meeting him, we physically looked quite a lot alike. He has much less patience than I do, like significantly less patience than I do. But we share mannerisms and characteristics that I can't explain because I didn't grow up with them.
So it's that whole nature versus nurture thing there, isn't it?
That
what are you designed to be like, and what do you learn to be like, I guess. Yeah.
But if you saw a photo of us side by side, it'd be obvious, particularly now that I've got a little bit of facial hair because it's something he did. But yeah, it was that was a fascinating thing to kind of reflect on how you're made up and what is it that makes your personality what it is.
Yeah. I mean, I've done sort of not got a hidden father I don't know about, but I have got a hidden grandfather I don't know about.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I did a bit of research on my family using Ancestry.com, and I discovered, I knew my grandfather, my mother's father, was a prisoner of war in the Second World War. What I didn't know was the dates of his incarceration, and found out that he was captured in 1941 and 1942 and released in 1945, in May of 1945, actually on the 12th of May, which is my birthday, and got back into the UK on about the 15th of May, and my mum was born on the 9th of July, 1945. So my grandfather is not my grandfather.
No.
I have no idea who he is. Both my grandfather and my grandmother on that side have both passed away. My mum kind of knew something and my dad kind of knew something, but no one really knows what happened. But I mean, I just think back to the circumstances. My grandmother at the time was 21 years old. She'd been married to my grandfather for about 8 months before he was captured, and had no idea whether or not he was coming back. So under those circumstances, she probably found somebody else. And it's I don't know. It's just one of those things. We've all got those things in our background that we're not really sure how they influence us or where they come from or whatever it is. And I think it's really interesting just to sort of, as you get older, to reflect on where you've come from. And my view is that I want to, when I get to the end of the journey, I want to make sure that I'm net positive in as much as what I leave behind. I've done some stuff that I'm not proud of, but I've done a lot of other stuff that I'm very proud of. And as long as I can keep my ledger so that more of it is positive than negative, I think that's a good life led.
Yeah, I agree.
And it's it's like you've got to enjoy yourself and try and do the good stuff. That's why I'm doing other stuff that I'm doing at the moment as well. Just try and build up my good stuff.
Families are interesting in New Zealand in particular because they were very small. We discovered about 3 years ago, Margaret and I, that her father served in a forestry sappers regiment in Hertfordshire in the Second World War, and so did my grandfather, my mother's father. And we looked up the ship manifests and photos and things, and there's a photo of the two of them standing within arm's length of each other. And you're like, wait a minute. And, one comes from Reefton, one comes from Rotorua. There's no other way they would have met had it not been for the circumstances of the war. And then they meet on the other side of the world. I met Margaret's father. He was sick with Parkinson's, so I didn't know him for very long. But we had no idea that he had served with my grandfather because my grandfather was Buster McCain, so not someone Carey. So there was no reason to make that connection. Yeah, fascinating kind of.
Well, I think things like that just show you that really we're all very connected, and all of this stuff that we're trying, people are trying to do to separate us it's not based on anything real. It's based on a political point of view that is only to give somebody power. It's not about anything else. Yeah. And we're driving ourselves apart for somebody else's gain, really. And we need to be more connected, I think, than we are. And I like some of the things I see around First Nations cultures that you see much better at being connected than we are as Westerners.
Absolutely right. I'm just thinking exactly that. I'm doing some work at the moment in the Hawke's Bay, some master planning work, and every single meeting we've had has started and ended with karakia. When we started the project, we were formally welcomed to the hospital site. It was a big formal welcome, and we had to introduce ourselves and say where we were from, and everybody did. Yeah. Now it's kind of, we've all realised, I think, those of us for whom this world isn't something we grew up in, that actually explaining who you are, introducing yourself and where you are from and who you are from and how you connect is actually, it feels, I now understand why so many Māori people have difficulty in the government and commercial world, because they're sitting there going, I don't know anyone in this room and we're just starting business. Yeah. Can we at least talk to each other and introduce each other? I now feel quite uncomfortable sometimes when we do that without actually even introducing ourselves, let alone talking about where we've come from and what makes us who we are. Yeah. I think there's something really quite lovely about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think
it's a deeper connection.
Yeah, I mean, but I think you'll also find that you get a better outcome as well. If you understand the people around the table better, you understand a little bit more about why they're saying the things they're saying and why they're, that having that understanding means that you're more likely to collaborate and less likely to be in conflict, because, you understand why people have got those particular drivers behind them and where they're coming from. And, I've certainly, I've been involved on a couple of trust boards, and one of the boards that I was on, they were looking at introducing a separate Maori board of governance because the standard white person's board of governance did not work for the Maori community, and very much the way you're saying, that there wasn't enough of the, I don't know if ceremony is the right word, but the Maori culture was not being represented, and the amount of pushback from other white men around the table to the idea of having another board and being influenced by Maori culture, it was quite shocking how challenged people were by that very idea.
And we're seeing a lot of it now, and it's the extremist reactions are being stoked a little bit, but that's a whole
other story. So let's travel back in time for a little while, and I'm just conscious of the time that we've been talking, which has been fantastic. But if we went back to see you as a 20-year-old, so you're probably nearly married at that point, I would say, and about 6 years away from finishing your degree or something like that, what piece of advice would you give to yourself?
The question implies that maybe I have some regrets, and I'm not sure that I have too many regrets. I mean, certainly, I could say that I could have knuckled down and finished my degree and not be distracted by things, and certainly my wife would tell you that, I should have just got on with it. Yes. And she's right, of course, but on reflection, I think that it's part of part of what's made me who I am.
Yeah.
And if I regret some of that stuff, then I've got to start thinking about regretting some of the things that make me who I am. And maybe it's a bit of an egotistical thing to say, but I quite like myself. I don't.
Well, that's
I
a
don't
good thing.
feel. Yeah, it is a good thing. So I think probably the biggest piece of advice would be just keep doing what you're doing. Trust your instincts. Very often, I found even in business that I'll often have a feeling about something. I should give that person a call, or this doesn't feel right or sound right. Maybe I need to find out something else.
Yep.
And every time I ignore that or suppress it or go, don't be silly, the feeling has almost always been proven right somehow. I should have run that person, because actually what I was feeling was I was picking up micro cues or something that they were unhappy or that something was going on, and I ignored it. So I guess that advice would be don't ignore your instincts.
Yeah, I think that's true. I mean, the gut instinct, sometimes we do try and suppress it quite a lot because it doesn't seem logical. But you're right. That listening to yourself as much as to other people, when something doesn't feel right for you, that probably means it's not right for some reason. And investigating that again, being curious. Why do I feel like that? What is it about this situation that makes me think like that? Is a good question to ask. I think it's a very good question to ask.
In many ways, it's actually the most logical thing.
Yeah.
Because it's a collection of your unconscious and conscious perceptions processed through your experience, and then out of that comes something which, I guess, if you think hard enough about it, you could turn it into a logical conclusion. But sometimes our instinctive, intuitive, emotional brains move much, much quicker than our logical.
Yes, they do indeed. Yes, and I think they're certainly more interesting to listen to, I would say, as well.
Sometimes, yes.
Yeah. Well, I mean, interesting doesn't always mean good.
Yeah, that's fair call.
So, if you were able to go to one place on Earth that you've never been to, where would that be? And also, why haven't you gone there yet?
I haven't travelled as much as I would have liked, I guess. So let me think about that for a minute. I've been to the US and Canada. I've been to parts of Europe, bits of Australia. I haven't done a lot of Asia. I do have a fascination with Japan, and I would like to go there at some point because it seems to me a country of extremes, but also a country of that's worked out how to live in pretty high density in a way that preserves the ability to honour each other as individuals and as people by and large. But that's just a perception, I guess. And then there's the architecture and all of that. So that'd be quite cool. I used to think it'd be nice to go into space. I read a lot of sci-fi, and I do anything involving sci-fi or flight or space travel. I think, this is pretty cool. I'd like to do that. Yeah. But I can't see unless I end up like William Shatner strapped into some billionaire's capsule. I can't see that ever happening. So
no. I mean, it's. I think it's going to happen at some point where that becomes commercially available. But at the moment, it's a billionaires club, and that's the next big thing. I think there'll be space tourism is going to be a thing, which I'm not sure. I'm not sure entirely agree with.
I think that technology around intelligence and digitizing intelligence and interfaces and androids and robots and all that kind of stuff has the potential maybe for us to have a different kind of future, which isn't about physically going places.
Maybe
digitally going places.
Sending an android that's got potentially an infinite life out to do space exploration makes more sense than sending a human out who's only got a limited life, I guess.
Or upload your consciousness into the digital world, and that's where your life is from now.
Yeah. That's a terrifying thought. Because
that's probably the only way we're going to achieve immortality.
But I'm not sure immortality is a good thing for human beings. I think we need a limitation on ourselves, because otherwise we just go mad. And you look at society. At some point, you need a change, and if everybody's immortal, you don't get that change.
Maybe. I'll send you a book recommendation which follows that idea to an extreme.
Yeah, I'll be very interested actually to see that. So I think that my last question is going to be, if you could meet and have a conversation with one person, either dead or alive, who would that person be?
Oh, crikey. Only one.
Oh, you can have two or three if you feel, Darryl.
Oh,
it's entirely up to you.
I don't know. There's so many. I mean, I studied a lot of art history, and a lot of our time through Italy and Europe was visiting galleries and museums and things. And there are standout people throughout history. I think immediately jump to someone like Leonardo da Vinci, who you think, what a brain, what a life, and
what could that man have achieved if he was born now?
Well, yeah, probably more than, say, Elon Musk. But and I think it's those minds where that are prepared to think beyond and take leaps and try stuff and take risks and all of that. That attracts me. That kind of thing. And then there's just raw talent, people like Michelangelo, who by all accounts was a hard guy to get on with. But then could he sculpt and paint and everything? Maybe I've just been seduced by their output. I don't know, Steve. But there were some people you definitely would never want to meet, you maybe want to meet if you could actually do something to them.
There's a long list of those people. Yeah,
probably.
Okay, well, look, thank you very much, Darryl, for making the time to talk to me again. And apologies for my technological issues last time round.
It was good. We were more polished this time, Steve.
Yeah, I think we were. Yeah,
we should take it on the road.
It has been a very good conversation again, and I've really enjoyed it. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'll speak to you very soon.
Indeed. Cheers.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to my podcast, A Penny for Your Thoughts, with me, Steve Penny. I hope you've enjoyed today's conversation, and I look forward to sharing my next conversation with you in the future. Thank you.